What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and it is a lovely morning here. I've had a great morning, got my kids off to school, and I'm ready to get into today's video. And today's video is going to piggyback off of what we talked about last week and what we showed you last week in the photography challenge I did with my son. In that video, you guys kind of saw how an amateur versus somebody who has experience with the camera kind of deals with composition and the framing of a photo, as we kind of figured out that that's the real big difference that separates kind of a professional from an amateur in the photography world. So I wanted to piggyback on that today and kind of get into the computer and kind of show you guys how to edit some of those photos, since we did not do any editing last time. If you guys are new to the channel, my name is Evan Andrews, and on this channel you will find everything from a creative standpoint. I'm a filmmaker, photographer, graphic designer, you name it. You see it on this channel. My channel is about a month and a half old now, and I've done a few different styles of video. I have done how-tos, we've done vlog style challenges, I've done kind of a storytelling perspective style videos, and I want you guys to go and leave a comment and let me know what kind of videos you guys have liked so far. If you guys like it all, I'll continue to make it all, but I'm trying to figure out what my viewers like the most. And today is gonna be another kind of how-to video. Like I said, we're gonna get inside the computer and we are going to edit some raw photos. For those that don't know, raw photos are a particular file extension that give us the most data inside the electronic file to later manipulate things like the shadows, the highlights, contrast, colors. It gives us more of an ability to manipulate those things in post inside Photoshop, Lightroom, whatever you prefer. For today's purposes, I'm going to be using Photoshop because that is generally what I use on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to be using the Camera Raw plugin that comes with Photoshop whenever you do download it. So if you do have Photoshop, you should have this, and it should work with just about any kind of raw photo. We're going to jump into the computer right now, and I'm going to show you guys how I like to edit my pictures and kind of show you my style and what I do and don't do in some particular situations. So let's get into it. All right, so we're in the computer now, and I've opened up one of the raw file formats. And when you do that in Photoshop, this is what you will get. You'll get the Camera Raw. It'll show the current version that you're using up here at the very top. And it'll kind of show you some of the data as far as what kind of camera you shot it on, the shutter speed, and everything that it shot it on will kind of show you in this upper right-hand area here. What I like to do is I like to take a quick look and see what the histogram up here in the top right is looking like. As you can see, there is a little blue triangle up here that is showing me a warning for clipping in my shadow area. The left side is the shadow area, the right side over here is more of the highlight area. And as you can see, I'm not getting any clipping up here, so that's a good start as far as my highlights go. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna first just visually look at my picture and see what happened with it. This picture overall looks kind of flat. So my style is I like to have really high contrast, and I like vibrant colors. So I will just go in and start messing with what I see as peaking. So right now I see that I'm getting my shadows peaked a little bit. So I'm gonna pump up my shadow a little bit. And as you can see, I'm going really, really far and it's still peaking. And now the image is a lot flatter than I want it to be. So I can see that pumping my shadow right there is not gonna take away the clipping that is happening. So what you can do is you can also play around with a few other areas in the Camera Raw extension. So the next thing that you can play with is you can play with the black slider, which as we see also does a similar thing. This is kind of manipulating just the black color on how light or how dark it is. Before we were manipulating the shadows, which is just the shadow area. Some other parts in here where you can manipulate those things. I'll kind of go through these here. Another tab that I like to use is the color grading tab. From here, we can manipulate each individual part from our shadows, highlights, and our midtones. So here with our slider, we can play with it a little bit more, and we can see that as we move our slider around, different things happen. Different things happen. So now I'm clipping up there. Again, I'm just doing this to show you dramatic instances of what you do when you play around with these. So I'm gonna go back here. Okay, everything's back to where it was. So, okay, so we're back with our basic image here. So I don't necessarily touch every aspect and every menu in the Camera Raw extension. I really just hover around the basic tab, the color grading tab, the color mixing tab, and then sometimes, depending on if a vignette or something is warranted, if I'm shooting portrait photography or something like that, you can come down to the effects panel, or even the optics panel will create some vignetting for you. Let's start back at the beginning. And the first thing that I want to do is, again, check this histogram, and I can see that it is very on the brighter side, as it's very right dominant in this area. So what I can do to kind of smooth that out a little bit is I go back to my color grading here, and I can pull the midtones out a little bit. Pull those midtones out just a little bit. I'll probably hover around like -20. And then next what I want to do is, while I'm here, I'll kind of just tweak the shadows and highlights a little bit to my liking. So again, we were still peaking on the shadows, and it looks like in almost every instance, we had a little bit of peaking in the shadow area. So for these, I'm not gonna really manipulate it too much. I might go like a -10, and highlights, I'll bring the highlight down just a little bit to like a, I don't know, a -5. And what I'll do is I'll go back to my basic tab, and then I will start doing the things that I like to do to the image. So I like a lot of contrast in my images, so I'll start pumping the contrast here, and I'll keep an eye on what that histogram is doing. So as you can see, the histogram is being pulled down a little bit. I'm gonna go with about 30 on this one. What you don't wanna do is you don't wanna put everything on the sliders either one way or the other. When you manipulate different sliders, they can affect how the other sliders are manipulated. So for example, in the contrast, I can manipulate just the contrast slider. I can manipulate the highlight, the shadow slider, and then go back even to my color grading of the shadows, midtones, and highlights, manipulate those even further. So for right now, I'm gonna leave the contrast on about 30. And then what I like to do from here is I like to start then playing with the color and kind of the feel of the picture. So here, because it's a very bright and a very colorful photo with all of the different colors in the paintings, I would turn up my vibrance here pretty high, probably to about like 30 as well, because I really want those colors to like kind of jump out and pop out. So saturation, I don't play with too much, and if you do, be very, very sparse with it. The one reason that you don't want to do the saturation all the way up is because when I turn it all the way up, you can see, yes, they get very, very saturated, but the picture looks very, very bad this way. So I'm gonna leave this on about 10 just to pump that color, and then I think I even might turn my vibrance up just a little bit. So the difference between vibrance and saturation is vibrance is going to turn up those colors without manipulating skin tones all too well. Now, for this example, there's not any people in this image, so it's going to just manipulate those colors and bring them out just a little bit. Saturation is going to do the whole image as a whole. So vibrance is really there to help for when you have skin tones in the picture, that when you do want to pump the saturation of the image without compromising those skin tones, you would really use vibrance in that particular scenario. But I like to use it for a lot of different things, more than just pumping up the saturation. The image is already looking a little bit better. We can come down here now to go back and revisit our color grading. What I like to do is, once I've tweaked one thing, I like to go back and look and make sure that I don't need to tweak anything else. Now, there are so many other things that I'm not gonna cover in this video that's more in depth in the Camera Raw plugin, but just to go back and kind of revisit the contrast style that I like, I'll kind of play around with my midtones here again. And you see, as I start to pump them up, the image gets a lot brighter. I don't want it to be so bright, so I'm gonna actually turn my midtones back to 0, and I'm going to pull my shadows down a little bit, just a little bit, not too much. Pop my highlights out, and now you can see that this image has a lot more contrast in it. And since I've done that, I don't like how vibrant the colors have came out. So I'm gonna go back to my vibrance here and I'm gonna change that back to about 30. I think that'll do it for our basic tab there. Other things that you can manipulate just to see what they do is, like I said, the whites and the blacks. You are just showing how bright the white is or how dark the black is. So for this example, I'm gonna pull it down just a little bit, probably go to about negative, I don't know, about negative 55 or so. Maybe negative 50, which negative 50 is a lot to bring something down, but in this instance, it makes better for what I want my image to look like. So moving on, the next area that we have here is the texture, clarity, and dehazing sliders. Now these, I only really use them if I'm doing landscape or I don't really touch these. Clarity maybe a little bit when I'm shooting people or portraits or something like that. Dehaze maybe a little bit there too, but I don't really mess with the texture or clarity too much. For this example though, since we do have like hard brick texture, I will kind of pump that up just a little bit, not too much, maybe about 14, 15. And then what I like to do, because sometimes I can't see it before I try it, I want to just pump the clarity, positive or negative, just to see what it's doing visually to my image. So in this instance, because we have that rough rock brick texture, pumping up the clarity just a little bit, maybe to about 6 or 7, does kind of sharpen up those lines that we see in the brick. So I really like pumping that up just a little bit here to kind of pop that out a little bit more. So it's looking good, it's looking vibrant, and that's kind of what I like. Now, just so you guys can understand what a few more things that you can do with the Camera Raw plugin is we have a curve section here, which if you know a little bit about Photoshop or any other color grading, photo editing, this is a really good tool to pull or push contrast in or out of the picture. So the white circle here is going to do the overall photo. And if I make a simple S-curve, you can see that I pumped a lot more contrast into there. So I don't use the curves too often anymore. I used to love it. I used to live in here. And what I found it was doing to a lot of my work was overdoing it. I found that I was able to use other menus in here and get a better look that I wanted out of those menus rather than this one. So the curves I don't mess with too much. And if I do, it's only as a last afterthought because maybe I'm not getting everything I want out of my grading menu in the midtones, the shadows, and the highlight. What you can also do is you can manipulate the color through the curves as well. You can manipulate the red channel, the green channel, or the blue channel. And just so that you guys can see this, I'll put an S curve on the blue channel. And I'm pulling down into the shadows, making the shadows more yellow, and putting highlights in blue, as you can see here. So these are good to use when you're kind of going for a certain color grade. You're not really correcting with this. It's more in the final stages of your photo or video manipulation. Again, a lot of what you see in this Camera Raw plugin, you'll see it throughout Lumetri Color and different other color grading aspects when it comes to video. So because we're working in photos, obviously we're just using the simple Camera Raw plugin in Photoshop. So I'm gonna leave those there though. I don't really wanna manipulate anything for my curve. Just to run you guys through some other menus. Again, this is more of a how-to, not an overview. You have detail, which you can affect your sharpening, your noise reduction, and your color noise reduction. I use that mostly in portraits when I'm shooting skin and I want things to maybe be a little bit flatter. But for the most part, I don't touch it. When you open a photo in Camera Raw, the sharpening is automatically at 40. The color, I believe, hovers around 20, 25, and then the noise reduction is all the way at 0. For this particular instance, I'm not gonna mess with anything there. It doesn't fit what I need for the photo. So one of the last things I would do with a picture like this and how vibrant the colors are and everything, I'm going to now go to my color mixer. Now the color mixer is really cool, and it's a really cool way to manipulate the colors of your image. So you have four different tabs here, and the first three are really the ones that I like to deal with. You have a hue, a saturation, and a luminance for your reds, orange, yellows, greens, aquas, blues, purples, and magentas. Now you might be thinking, aqua, blue, yes, they are closely related, but they have very different effects when you go with the sliders on here one way or the other. So I'm gonna kind of show you what I would do in manipulating these. So the first thing that I like to do is, if I have a blue sky in my picture, I like to really bring out the blue sky. So what I'll do is I'll go to the saturation and I'll go to the blues tab here, and I will pump that up just a little bit. Again, I want to make small tweaks, not huge, great tweaks, because once I start manipulating one thing, it's going to change what I just previously manipulated just a little bit. So I don't want to go crazy out of the box with it and not be able to go up more or down less or anything like that. So I want to crank up the blues a little bit. Now it's going to affect all the blues in the image. So any blue inside of my paint area is also going to be manipulated. So I'm going to leave that on about 25. And then I'm going to look at the area of other colors and see what I maybe want to bring out, maybe want to push back, maybe want to do. So the magentas, I think I want to bring out a little bit more. We have some red and purples in here that I think I want to bring out a little bit. So I'm going to pump the magenta just a little bit. Now it's not crazy. It's not doing anything crazy. It's bringing out some of this up here, some of this rainbow, and that works for me. I also want to do the same thing with the purples, push the purples saturation about as much as I just pushed the magentas. So everything here is looking good. I don't think I want to manipulate anything else. I have really good color in the yellows. I like that already. So the next tab that I move over to is the luminance. So the luminance is how light or how dark something is. So for my blue sky, I usually like to pump it up just a little bit. If I'm going for a more dark contrasted background, I could go with something like that, but I think I'm just gonna push it to about a 4. Very, very minute. You might not even to the naked eye understand what you did, but it's just a little bit of tweak that kind of fills out the image visually a little bit. So I think that looks good. Also with the purples, I think I'm gonna bring them down just a little bit, about 15. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the magentas as well. Bring them down about a -30. So that looks really good. So the next part that I'm gonna move to is the Hue tab. And the Hue tab is going to tell the computer how we want our colors portrayed. So you can see that you have all of your ranges of colors here again, and you kind of have 2 shades either way, left or right, on each slider. So if you want your reds more of like a pinky red, then you can go this way. If you want them more of like an orange red, you can go this way. And you can see that as I move to the right and move it more towards the orange, all of the red in here is going to move more towards that orange or more towards that pink. So for the reds for this particular one, I don't want to manipulate them because I want them to stay more true red. So I'm going to leave that at 0 and kind of just go manipulate more of the colors that I previously manipulated. So I'll start at the bottom here. The blues, I want to keep that blue kind of dark. See, if I go this way, I'm turning it purple, which might be a cool effect that you might be going for. But for this particular, I'm not. I'm kind of want to leave that there in the middle. So the purples here, I think the purples on the wall, I want to brighten them out a little bit more on the pink side, add a little pink to them. And for the magentas, I'm going to pull those down to the darker side just a little bit. And then for just an extra little bit of kick, I'm going to pump up the oranges to the yellow drift just a little bit. So now, after kind of manipulating my colors there, I think this picture looks good for me to go ahead and post. So after that, there's really not much more that you need to do other than open up the image, and from here, it will open it up right into Photoshop and you can then begin to manipulate the image even further if you like. You can do cropping, you can resize the picture, you can do a majority of things. You can add a watermark or a logo or something like that to it to then post it on Instagram or wherever you post your pictures. So that's gonna do it for this video today, and I hope you guys got a little bit of an insight on how to manipulate your pictures. You can take this knowledge to almost any platform or device these days. Even in your iPhone, you can go through and manipulate the shadows, the highlights, the contrast, the colors. You can go through and manipulate all of those different things, even in your phone. So you don't need fancy equipment. You don't need a DSLR camera. You don't need even Photoshop to do this kind of stuff. You can take all the tips and all the tricks that I showed you in the different sliders here in the Camera Raw utility and use them on something that is native to you and that you understand. If you guys like this video, make sure that you go and hit the like button right now. If you are not a subscriber to me, please hit the subscribe button, hit that bell for all the notifications for all my weekly uploads on everything creative, filmmaking, photography, graphic design, you name it. We're doing it here on this channel. Don't forget to go leave a comment and let me know your favorite style of video that I have released thus far in my channel. Again, we are a new channel, only about a month and a half old, and I'm looking to give you guys what you want to see. Stay tuned for next week's video where we are going to take it back to the basics, and I'm going to go over 5 tips that I wish that I would have had as a beginner filmmaker. If you guys are out there and you are just getting your journey started with photography or filmmaking or a graphic design, anything creative, make sure you stay tuned. Every Friday, 8 a.m. is when I release. So stay classy, everybody, and I will see you next week. Peace out.